During the last episode in our series on the economic and trading history of the Roman Empire, we observed the fascinating interactions between Romans travelling down the Red Sea and the people of the eastern coast of Africa. As those sailors were casting off to the south, others were preparing to ride the monsoon winds east. These ancient routes, used for millennia by even the most ancient civilizations, would eventually lead Rome to make contact with some of the most sophisticated regions. Welcome to our video on Roman trade in the northern Indian kingdoms. Roman vessels bound for the enigmatic and prosperous lands of India departed their Red Sea bases in the month of July, when seasonal northerly winds blew down the Gulf. From these ports, ships embarked on a 700-mile-long initial voyage to the Arabian port known as Ocholis, where they would rest and recuperate before moving on. An old manuscript listing ports and harbours, a periplus, describes this settlement as not so much of a port of trade as harbour and a watering station, the first stopping place for those sailing on, a point of view Pliny also verifies. It was located near the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb, where the Red Sea met the Gulf of Aden, and was roughly 30 miles south of Musa. The long eastern voyage was initially made by Greek ships following the coast of Iran in the 1st century BC. According to the periplus, men formerly used to sail in smaller vessels following the curves of the bay. However, when later Greek captains charted the shape of India's coast, they discovered that shorter open ocean crossings were possible. Legends emerged that the very first transocean voyages to India were made and mapped by a sea captain named Hippolos, and it was for him that the crucial southwest monsoon winds were named. As we once again accompany the Roman ships on their journey, we see that they usually entered the Gulf of Aden in early August at the dawn of the southwest monsoon winds. Some ships would follow the Arabian coast as far as Cana, while others sailed south to the point of the Horn of Africa, and would then set out into the open ocean from either of these points. From here, captains and their crews trusted that the monsoon winds would carry them to their destination. These winds were often incredibly powerful, usually blowing at around 40 miles per hour, but would commonly intensify, increasing to around 60 miles per hour in speed, and were accompanied by high, overhanging waves. Roman captains making this trip timed their voyages so that they would arrive in September, spending 2 months in India until the return winds came in early November. As they approached the subcontinent, Roman merchants had taken 70 days on their Egypt to India journey and were now roughly 3,000 miles away from their empire. The famous Indus River was known widely as the mightiest of all rivers along the Indian Ocean. Its delta's 7 outlets expelled a vast quantity of fresh water, which Roman pilots could recognize in the seawater due to its pale hue compared to the rest of the ocean water, and the increase in the eel population. During the 1st century AD, the Indus region was ruled by a series of Indo-Parthian warlords, who controlled the main cities in the Sindh region. One of the most well-known kings of this lesser-known state was Gondophares. When they reached these lands, Roman ships moored at a port named Babarikon on the central mouth of the Indus, but most trade was conducted further inland at the royal city of Minigar. This was the district capital of southern Indo-Parthia, and the periplus tells us that all cargoes were taken up the river to the king at the metropolis being Minigar. At this stage, as the Roman merchants unloaded their cargo, they would begin to experience what appears in hindsight to be a sophisticated and highly organized process of bureaucratic organization, outlined to us in the Arthashastra. Firstly, Roman cargo unloaded at Babarikon was assessed and catalogued by a customs officer, known as the Antipala, or the officer in charge of the boundaries. This person would examine the quality of incoming cargo and verify it by stamping his own personal seal on it. He also collected road and ferry tolls on merchants, kept customs records, and maintained a network of spies to keep information on incoming cargo, and to keep an eye on suspicious mercantile activity. As the merchants and their cargo arrived at the grand gates of Minigar, another official, known as the Superintendent of Tolls, operated a customs station, marked by a distinctive banner which signified his presence. His staff would, according to the Arthashastra, record who the merchants are, where they come from, how much merchandise they bring, and where they received their first customs seal. Details taken at both Babarakan and Minigar were routinely compared to ensure taxes were not being avoided somehow. Goods without a seal mark were likely subject to double tax rates, while those having a counterfeited seal would have their entire cargo forfeited. Despite the necessary taxes, natives who imported foreign goods were favoured by having their taxes cut. Roman merchants visiting the great city at Indo-Parthian Minigar offloaded bulk clothing, multicultural textiles, and printed cloth. Dealers also offered products as diverse as expensive Storax resin perfumes, crystal clear glass vessels, and expensive silverware for luxury dining. It is interesting to note that the high demand for Roman glass in Minigar and the East in general was due to its high quality and pure nature, whereas glass ornaments produced in India and China were small, heavy, and filled with opaque impurities. Higher value deals were often conducted by Roman traders with imperial coinage, extremely high demand red coral, or peridot gemstones known as chrysolithon, or golden stones. Furthermore, Romans would trade incense products, which had been obtained on the journey to India when the traders stopped off at trading centres in Africa and Arabia. The Mediterranean variety of red coral is worth a more detailed examination, as it is incredibly interesting in many ways. Most types of this coral would become brittle or discolor when brought to the surface, but the Mediterranean variety did not. To both the Roman people and the populations in India, Mediterranean red coral had practical, mythical, religious, and supernatural uses which increased its desirability. It was, for example, used for things as broad as decoration for jewelry and ornaments, an adornment for Celtic swords, and as an amulet which supposedly protected the wearer from poison. It is said that Roman authorities were amazed at how much Indians desired this niche good. The Arthashastra even advises rulers to stockpile this magical substance in the royal treasuries alongside such precious items as pearls, rubies, and diamonds. At the turn of the 1st century AD, the Indo-Parthian kingdom's territory extended north into the Hindu Kush, often receiving trade goods from both sides of the Himalayan mountains and from the Bactrian region as trading caravans left the Central Asian Silk Road. Roman traders could therefore exchange their own goods for a variety of exotic Indian, Afghan, Iranian, Scythian, and Chinese goods at Minigar. Perhaps the most important export market in this bustling trade centre involved spices, aromatics, and plant-based drugs. Roman merchants received locally grown bdellium, a fragrant resin, nard, an aromatic amber, and lycium from the Himalayas, as well as costus from Kashmir. From the Silk Road traffic that reached the Indus region, Babarakan offered valuable silk from China, as well as exotic animal furs, including mink and sable. Interestingly, it was a gift of a valuable sable fur cloak that the young Genghis Khan gave to Togrul as a gift in order to win his favour. Also received were natively produced indigo dyes, turquoise stones from Iran, and lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. Departing Indo-Parthia, Roman ships sailed hundreds of miles to the south along the coast, heading for a Gujarati port known as Barigaza. These sea trade routes were notoriously dangerous for the deep-hulled Roman ships, as the vessels would routinely run aground on invisible underwater hazards, or would be pulled back and forth by powerful currents. The port of Barigaza was ruled by a dynasty of formerly nomadic Saka kings, who swept down onto the Indian subcontinent from their homeland on the Asian steppe during the 1st century BC. It is said that in 26 BC, while Augustus was campaigning in Hispania, the princeps received his first emissaries from these Indo-Scythian peoples. This embassy was sent during a period where the Sakas still ruled most of the Indus region, but were being progressively threatened by Parthia's eastern expansion. Therefore, it is likely that these Saka emissaries came to Augustus seeking a military alliance, by which they and the Romans could pincer the Parthians from both east and west. Likely having heard of the former conflict between the two empires, the Saka probably had the impression that Rome was going to attempt a conquest of Parthia. This diplomatic mission was likely the product of the last true Indo-Scythian king, known as Aziz, who was responsible for sending yet another embassy in 22 BC. This time, Saka ambassadors delivered a letter to Augustus which had been written in Greek by Aziz himself. It asked again for an alliance against the Parthians and contained other diplomatic requests. However, at this point the Romans were concluding peace with Persia, and therefore only agreed to a treaty of friendship between themselves and the Indo-Scythian Saka kingdom. With this embassy came a number of exotic gifts for the Romans, such as a one-armed Indian youth, a Himalayan monal pheasant, and tigers. On top of these extravagances, a Buddhist or Jain missionary also accompanied the emissaries from India, who sought to establish a religious site in Rome itself. While this request was denied by Augustus, the missionary in question remained with Augustus well into 21 BC. There were few good quality natural harbours on India's western coast, and Barigaza was the closest alternative, being roughly 30 miles upstream along the Narmada River. Strong currents, shoals and reefs in the Gulf and in the river made the approach to this centre dangerous for ships, especially those of foreigners who were not familiar with the local perils. The Saka king Nahapana, who ruled during the late 1st or early 2nd century, realised these risks and arranged for local rowing boats to guide and tow Roman freighters past the sandbanks and other obstacles. This service was likely paid for by the Roman traders, with the acquired funds going to the royal treasury. After reaching Barigaza, ships would dock in the river next to the city, and their merchant crews would proceed to trade in the city's port district. One of the main commodities which attracted Roman merchants to northern India was the diverse and plentiful range of colourful precious gemstones produced at inland mines. In contrast, only a few mines of this sort existed in the Roman Empire, and these mines did not produce nearly the quality and variety of gems to satiate the Roman consumer base's desire for luxury. Eastern gemstones were prized for their beauty and expense, and they quickly became an essential feature in widespread Roman fashions. Affluent Roman women wore gems in their rings, necklaces, earrings, hair clasps, tiaras, and much more. The status garnered by possessing these precious objects was enough that in the 1st century AD, a single rare and costly jewel was enough to attract male attention and draw envy from other women. However, not all Romans were keen on this newfangled expensive fad. Clement of Alexandria, for example, criticised foolish women who wore such Indian gems, while Martial called it their cunning plunder levied from us for the sake of infatuation. It was not only women who adorned themselves in these stones. Men increasingly wore larger amounts of rings encrusted with Eastern gemstones as an ostentatious status symbol and display of wealth. From engravings on drinking vessels to ear pendants, the usage of these gemstones was almost endless, justifying their high price. Further inland from Barigaza was a city that it served called Minagara, which was the capital city of the Saka kingdom in Gujarat. The city's name might sound familiar, as we did indeed just mention Minigar in this Indus region. This is because the indigenous Indian civilizations called the Saka nomads the Min, and their capitals were therefore known as Minigara or City of the Min. When Minigar on the Indus was eventually captured by the Parthians, the new capital of Minigara was created in Gujarat as a replacement. The Saka kingdom centralized the revered gemstone mines under their control, and placed prohibitions on private dealers who sought to bring stocks of crystals and gems into designated trade cities. These measures ensured that foreign merchants were forced to buy precious stones from Saka government agents, meaning that the revenue would flow into state treasuries. Valuable goods, including these gemstones, were collected at a secondary royal court at a city named Ujjain in central India. They were collected as royal tribute there by the Sakas, and were then sent to Barigaza in order to be sold by state agents to visiting maritime traders. The Periplus explains that from this place, Ujjain, came things that contributed to the region's prosperity and supplied trade with us. Goods sent the 200 miles from Ujjain to Barigaza included onyx, agate, Indian cotton garments, and large quantities of cloth. Stocks of cotton and spices, Chinese silk yarn, silk cloth, ivory, and precious stones were also taken aboard Roman ships at Barigaza, ready for transport back to the bustling Roman markets. Also ready for transport back to the empire were new crop varieties, which were imported from the Saka-dominated region of India for their own cultivation. An example of this process was a variety of reed-like stalked millet, which was successfully transplanted to Italy and produced a yield which was far greater than traditional Mediterranean crops. The main export brought by the Romans to Barigaza was Italian wine, accompanied by Laodicean wine from Asia Minor and Arabian wine acquired on their outbound voyage. Lucian, a Syrian satirist, suggested that, owing to climate, when the Indians drink wine they quickly become drunk and behave twice as mad as any Greek or Roman. This unfamiliarity with and sensitivity to wine might be inferred as a lack of much wine being produced natively in India. Other Roman exports to the Saka kingdom included raw glass, copper, tin, and lead, in addition to the aforementioned plain clothing, printed fabrics, red coral, and peridot gemstones, which were also exported to the Suren kingdom of Indo-Parthia. The Saka would also encourage Roman traders to exchange their imperial money to the state for native Indian coins before they did business. This was because the Roman Empire was rich in precious metals such as gold and silver, and Roman currency was considered a reliable one throughout Eurasia. Roman denarii were therefore minted on a pure silver standard, and aurei, gold coins, were issued in solid gold. By contrast, most Indian kingdoms, though they were prosperous in terms of exotic trade goods, had no gold coinage, and their silver currency was often impure and contained a large portion of base metals. Saka rulers therefore imposed favourable currency exchange rates for Roman merchants in order to draw these precious metals from the Roman economy and to enrich the silver reserves of their own kingdom. During his reign, King Nahapana began to mint new Saka coins with a superior silver content, and modern metal analysis has verified that these coins were minted from silver melted down from Roman denarii. Therefore, trade with India increased the continual drain of silver from the Roman economy, one of the negative impacts of international trade which ran parallel to the many positives. We are planning to make more videos on the Roman economy, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button. We would like to express our gratitude to our Patreon supporters and channel members who make the creation of our videos possible. Now you can also support us by buying our merchandise via the link in the description. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.